This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Okay, so let's talk about this run game and what the Cleveland Browns are going to need from their run game and what they're going to need statistically from their running backs to reach the output that they're used to. Now, if you look at last year, the Cleveland Browns had about 2,500 yards, 2,490 to be exact. They averaged about 146 a game, and they had 19 touchdowns, right? All right, so when you look at replacing that production, obviously you need your number one running back to get a good chunk of that production. You need Deshaun Watson to get some of that production. You need Kareem Hunt. So how are we going to break this down? One, let's start with Jerome Ford. What do we need from Jerome Ford or whoever is going to be the feature back, right? If it switches to Pierre Strong, but it's probably going to be Jerome Ford. What do we need from Jerome Ford in order to feel comfortable about where this run game is going to be and if this run game is going to be as productive as they need it to be, right? So I would say the line for Jerome Ford is about 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns. Now, I think he's already at 2 rushing touchdowns or maybe 1. I think he's just at 1 rushing touchdown and 2 receiving touchdowns. So right now he has 3 total, 1 rushing. I don't think it's out the realm of possibility he gets 7, but you need to get 7 from him and about 1,000 yards rushing, which is very doable. He's going to be asked to do it in about 15 starts if he stays healthy. And that's very much doable, right? 15 starts, 1,000 yards, and we're not even going to count the couple hundred he has. So let's go 900 yards. Divided by 15. I mean, like, we're asking for 60 yards a game. So as long as Jerome Ford stays on that 60 plus yards a game marker, we're good. I think that's fine there. I think the yards per carry, look, you'll be happy with anything above 4.5 or honestly anything above 4 3/4. So 4.3 and above yards per carry. 60 plus yards. If he stays at that average at 60 divided by 4.3, it's about 14 carries a game. Very much doable for Jerome Ford. I think he can handle that kind of responsibility. Again, 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns. If you get that from your feature back, it's not great, but it's fine because you have other ways of filling that in. So that's 1,000 of, I think the bare minimum that they need to get as a running game is about 2,000 yards. So 1,000 right there for the feature back. Bare minimum, they need to get to 2,000 above what they have, right? To reach what they were last year or similar, be still top 5. So you just need 1,000 yards for Jerome Ford, about 7 touchdowns. That sound doable? Sounds doable to me. I think it's doable. All right. From Deshaun Watson. No, my bad. Kareem Hunt. Here's all I need from Kareem Hunt. 60 yards. And I'll fill in the touchdown number later after I talk about Watson. But 600 yards from Kareem Hunt. Again, we're talking about 15 games. 600 yards. We're talking about 40 yards a game, right? So between Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt, your 2 backs, you want to get 100 yards a game. I think that's doable. You get what? 1,600, 7 touchdowns. What did Nick have last year? I believe Nick had 15 touchdowns last year. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong there. But I do believe Nick had, let's see, I'm looking at it right now. Nick Chubb had 12 touchdowns last year. So let's just say you want Kareem to get 5 touchdowns rushing. So 600 yards, 5 touchdowns. You want to get between Kareem and Jerome Ford about 1,600 yards and about 12 touchdowns, right? That's where you want to replace the bulk of the Nick Chubb production. Just split it between those two, and I think it's doable. I think Jerome can get over 60 yards a game. I think Kareem can get over 40 yards a game. I think it's very much doable for these guys for the rest of the season. 5 touchdowns. It seems like a task. Like, I know, again, when Nick Chubb goes down, it seems impossible to fill the void of that production. But when you break it down to how that production actually needs to be filled and how much production we're actually talking about, it starts to feel a lot more reasonable. Now, from Deshaun Watson, this is another huge thing, right? The fact that they have a quarterback that they can expect a good chunk of rushing production from is huge for the Cleveland Browns, because now instead of just trying to split it between 2 guys, you're splitting it between 3, 4, maybe 5 guys. It makes the load on everybody a lot easier. Deshaun, I mean, we've talked about this before. We expect Deshaun to get 500 rushing yards and about 8 touchdowns. And last I checked, Deshaun was on pace for those numbers even this year, especially since he's had to run more this part of the season than anybody anticipated because of weather and offensive line issues. So Deshaun, 500 yards, 8 touchdowns. I mean, like, if he gets to 8, that's great. But I mean, he's already had, and I'm trying to pull up the game log right now, so I'm 100% sure, not, spreading misinformation, but I believe he is pretty close to on track for these numbers when it comes to his rushing stats. But Deshaun, that's what you want from him as a runner. And I think that's what you can expect from him. Look, nobody's complaints about Deshaun Watson has been about his athletic ability so far in his stay in Cleveland. Yeah, right now Deshaun is on track for about 476. You get 476 or 470 and 6 touchdowns. My bad. I'm speaking in terms I understand, not everybody else. And you get between 470 yards, 6 touchdowns, to 500 yards, 8 touchdowns. You feel great. So far, he's on track for 470 and 6 touchdowns. But let's say he plays better, gets on track to that, gets that extra 30 yards, extra 2 touchdowns, and all of a sudden now we have 2,100 yards plus of what they already have gained throughout the season. You're already looking at 15, 20 touchdowns. So that's good. And then the last chunk that I think you're going to want to add here is about 200 yards and maybe like 3 touchdowns, I think is a fair number, from etc. That could be Pierre Strong, who I think already had a touchdown. That can be, Elijah Moore on an end around. That can be literally whatever, right? Whenever you're just doing something different, somebody other than the 1 or 2 running backs, the first 2 running backs on the depth chart, or Deshaun Watson's running the ball, get 200 yards and 3 touchdowns from that. And then we're looking at 2,300 yards plus 23 touchdowns. And then if we look at the Browns' current team stats, you'll see that they are going to be above what they had last year. So if we go Browns team stats, you'll see that they'll be above what they are at currently. So right now, the Browns have total rushing about 482 yards. So we know that some of these yards have come from Nick Chubb, 170 of them. No touchdowns, but 170 yards. The Jerome Ford's already had 160. So now we're really just asking for Jerome not even to get 60 yards a game. We're asking for less than that for him to hit these numbers, because again, we just want him to get to 1,000 total. So what, he only has about 840 left to go. So, I mean, it's real reasonable. He's already had a touchdown. You've already gotten a touchdown from Pierre Strong. So that's 1/3 out the way if you're etc. And now we're talking about a rushing offense that can get to what, 2,782. That would outgain what they did last year if they want to. But realistically, you just want them to get to that 2,300 total number, right? So you see here how the Browns aren't asking anything ridiculous from their running backs this year, especially with Nick Chubb being out, and how much possible it is for the Browns to replicate a similar level of production that they've had with these guys. Now, the thing that won't change, and the thing that Nick Chubb does change, for all my running backs don't matter people, all the people ready to scream, running backs don't matter, I'm not with you. I think running backs matter. I think the difference is when you have to replace the production by committee, there is an element of respect that you will not get from the defense that will hurt you in the passing game, versus if a lot of this production was coming from one person. Because a committee is hard to fear. A committee is hard to change your game plan around. For a committee is what it is. It's a committee. It's more about the offensive line. It's more about stacking the box. It's not necessarily about doing anything specific. So it's hard to exploit things off of a committee if you're an offense. So that's where it kind of hurts you, right? Or when it's 3rd and 1, or when it's 4th and goal, or when you get into these situations where, hey, the committee might not be able to get it done because you don't have a single great person. Remember what I said about the wide receivers, right? When your wide receivers are a committee, that's all fine and good until you get to 4th and 3. Because on 4th and 3, it stops becoming about the committee and it starts becoming about the one player you trust to make that play. It's the same thing for the Browns when it comes to any type of short yardage situation, or just any time where they just need to run the ball and teams are stacking the box. You need somebody to be better than that. That's where Nick Chubb would be great for you, right? They're going to have to find a different way to succeed in those situations. So don't take this as, oh, Nick Chubb doesn't matter. Running backs don't matter. It doesn't matter if your running back gets hurt. It sucks. It's going to change things for the Cleveland Browns. That's no doubt. But the production can still be there with the committee. You can still move the ball. You can still have a respectable run game. You can still have a top 10 level run game even without Nick Chubb, because I do think the offensive line, the scheming and everything else is so good around this run game that you can make that happen. So don't take what I'm saying. And I think sometimes people like to run to one camp or run to the other camp when I'm just saying something very, very reasonable. This does not mean Nick Chubb does not matter. I would rather have Nick Chubb than be sitting here dividing out rushing yards between like 12 different guys, right? Nobody wants to do that. You would much rather be, hey, I got 16 from Chubb, and I know I'm going to get at least 12 touchdowns from Chubb, and then all I got to worry about getting 300 yards from this guy and maybe 400 from the quarterback. But this is the situation we're in, and if one thing makes you feel better, this is a problem that has popped up that I think the Browns can have a decent solution for. It's all I'm saying. I think they can have a relatively fine solution for losing Nick Chubb. And I think that will only make them stronger in the long run when Nick Chubb comes back and now Jerome Ford is now a full-blown veteran running back who you can trust in these situations. Or maybe you find out that Jerome Ford ain't got it. Right now you get the opportunity. It's going to make you better in the long run. But right now in the short term, this is how you can roll with the punches when it comes to losing Nick Chubb for the season. But that's it for today. Another video coming out later today. But that's it for right now. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better day.